started using marijuana and barbiturates when I was 14 years old.
I started using marijuana when I was 13 years old.
I started dropping pills when I was around 12 or 13. But I really wanted to shoot, though, because I wanted to get in the crowd.
I used to hang around with a few fellas who were a few years older. They used to go to dances and took pills. And I thought that these people were the hip people, or the swingers, the guys that always had a girl. And they offered me pills, and I started taking them.
There was this bunch of guys I stood with who looked up to this group of guys who were about 2 or 3 years older than us. And in the neighborhood, these kind of guys were our models that we fashioned ourselves after. Whatever they did, we did. And
you know, everybody said to do it, or, you know, it was bad for you, so that's why I wanted to try it. And I thought it was hip, you know.
And as I look back, I remember I saw guys that wore their hair a little different than most other guys, and their clothes a little different. They had their cars picked up a little different. And as a kid, I wanted to be like these guys.
It was new and it was exciting, and you know, I liked staying out all night. You know, it was pretty romantic.
I guess I felt a need to belong, an escape.
You know, of course I didn't like what my parents were always telling me to do, you know, and this was sort of an escape from it.
I went out with my first date, you might say, and they asked me, you know, do you know what a joint is? Now, of course, you know, I didn't want to say I didn't know. And they pulled out of their pocket, and then I was about 14 then. But I kept doing it because it was all very exciting and glamorous. And I was one of those people who thought that they would never get hooked. I thought that that was for the next guy. And what I would do is space it over a period of 2 or 3 days. I would make sure that I never used 2 days in a row. And for a period of 5 or 6 months, I would do this. And I thought that by doing this, that I wouldn't get hooked.
I felt that the day wouldn't be complete without some marijuana, even though it didn't have any physical effect. But as time went by, you find yourself wanting something else besides marijuana. Then you smoke marijuana and drink wine, and then after the wine kind of don't get it, then I got introduced to drugs, and I sniffed drugs for a period of 2 years, which sniffing habit is about one of the worst habits you can get, because everything kind of stays down in your stomach. And I was snorting for 2 years, and I thought I didn't have any habit.
It seemed after a while, the pills didn't get it anymore. So at the age of 15, I started using heroin. And I used it for a few years. And when I started, I didn't think that I would be addicted. I thought that, you know, I could take a little bit on the weekends, just like I did with the pills.
We started with the goofballs at first, barbiturates, and that lasted for about a year. And a lot of us went to either cough medicine or right on junk. And from then on out, I just got hooked, and that was it.
I was using about 2 years before I realized I had a habit. You know, and I didn't really realize it until I wouldn't admit to myself that I had a habit. You know, I thought I could just keep on going without, you know, getting addicted. And I supported it, you know, by stealing, you know, boosting, stealing from my mother, you know, cashing my mother's checks in, you know, when there wasn't anything left in the bank. And all kinds of things, you know, anything you can think of, that's what I did, you know, to try and get money. I even went around stealing from the March of Dimes, those little boxes that you put money in.
You have to go out and steal from your mother, or you know, steal from a supermarket or a department store or something to get more money, and then go back and try your luck again, all the while being sick and afraid and nervous and a conglomeration of a million different things.
When I started out, I was using $10 a day. This was in a period of 9 months. It had gone up to $100 a day, because the more you use, the more expensive it gets. I had to steal, shoplift, steal from my parents, forge checks, just about anything to get the money.
I used to hustle and steal and do almost everything that I could do to get money. When I sell stuff, I picked it up from my brothers. They taught me. Since I was about 8 years old, I used to, like, be their delivery girl. I used to deliver stuff for them, and they would pay me, you know, about $5 a week or something like that. So, you know, like, it wasn't nothing really exciting. I was always around stuff since I was a kid because my brothers were dope, too. And then they sort of, you know, taught me everything I know, like steal and, you know, prostitute and everything.
After a while, I had to steal quite a bit of money every day. And I started stealing and breaking into places and gambling. And it wound up after a period of time, it was just too much until I got arrested.
I got busted when I was 17. Been busted 4 times altogether. Marked, suspicion of narcotics, sales of marijuana, forgery.
Most people think like it's, you know, when you're getting busted and the cops are chasing you, jumping over the rooftops and, you know, running and all that stuff, you know, leaping and all that, you know, and they're chasing you with guns, you know. You know, what about when they, like, you're walking down the street, you know, and you got some dope on you, you know, in your pocket, and you think you're safe, you know, you're going home to take off, and then all of a sudden, like, the man just comes up on you behind you, just grabs it. Hey, you want to come in here a minute? And your stomach drops, you know, and like, oh, no.
That's when it kind of all comes down on you. Once that you hear that door slam, and you know it's not going to open again until somebody comes for you. And
I got the feeling, you know, of being closed in and so forth. And for the first time in my life, I looked around me and seen nothing but bars and officers walking around with blue suits on and the whole bit, the keys, everything. And I walked in the day room and I didn't know anybody, you know, and a great fear came over me.
I kept using drugs and I kept getting arrested and I kept going to jail and kicking habits. I think the first time I realized that I was in real serious trouble was on that felony pinch. I didn't ever possibly think that I could be hooked, you know, that was for somebody else. I could take it or leave it. I thought I was, you know, somebody special. And then when I was in jail on that felony pinch, I felt very sick after about 12 hours. I couldn't understand what it was. It took me about 10 hours to snap to the fact that I was kicking a dope habit. You know, I just started getting sick and, well, I must be hooked, you know, before I knew what happened. I guess I was hooked. It creeps up on you like that.
I think the worst experience I've had is when I had to kick those habits, how sick I'd get, how I'd beg to die, do anything just to get out of that misery.
And it felt like I had the flu, or I had a very bad case of the flu. And at first I couldn't, you know, I kind of wondered what it was. But as time went by, about 7 or 8 hours later, and I really started to get into it, I knew it was because of the drugs. And I was more or less in cold sweats most of the time, and I couldn't get comfortable. Most of the time I had to lay flat on my back on the floor. This was the only amount of comfort I could get. I only could do it like that for maybe 2 minutes at a time, and I would have to change positions. And I would get up and walk back and forth in the cell, and I started to dry up. I was sweating, but at the same time, I felt like I was drying up inside. I couldn't hold any food down. They brought me a bologna sandwich about 6 o'clock that night and a cup of tea. The tea, I just about got down. The food, I couldn't even touch. And as I got into the night, I found that I couldn't sleep either. It was impossible to sleep. It was just jumping from one position to another, one position for another, hoping that like any minute somebody would come and bail me out. And nobody was coming. And I really started to realize that, you know, I was a hooked dope fiend. I was just like guys I thought I would never get like. You know, I never thought I'd get as bad as the other guy. But there I was, locked in a cell, and I knew what it was. I really knew what the word hooked meant then.
The same cycle of going round and round, in jail, out jail, in the department store, stealing out of the department store, police picking you up for no reason at all. You know, just becoming, let's say, an outcast.
Like I quit taking dope once for 6 months, and I was convinced that I could do it on my own. So I lasted 6 months until there was some situation I couldn't handle, or I don't know what it was, but the phone rang and somebody had some stuff and I ran, you know. I may, out of 10 calls, I may refuse 9 of them, but that day always used to come when I would accept and I'd go out the door to get a fix.
Yeah, I'll never forget the look on my mother and father's faces. The first time they came in to see me in jail after I got arrested. You know, my mother was crying, she had tears, and my father had a complete look of shock and disappointment on his face. And that was the first time I really seen them, and, you know, really took a look at what I was doing to them.
And then I got arrested, and my mother had like a mild nervous breakdown, you know, because it was a complete shock to her. She didn't know anything about it, and they called her up and said that I just got arrested for narcotics, and I had robbed a drugstore, and I was charged with larceny and breaking the state narcotic act, you know, and she was broken up for about 2 or 3 months. She couldn't even really talk too good, you know, to me or anything. And, like, I couldn't face anyone in the family.
And my mother used to know all the time, you know, when I had stuff for me, and that was every day. And she looked at me, and she was so shocked, she started crying for about 15 or 20 minutes. You know, and I tried to convince her that I wasn't high, but, you know, you could see it from a mile away. My eyes were all glassy. I was very, very sloppy, you know, I was talking like out of the side of my mouth, you know, drooling, that kind of a thing. And she got up from the kitchen table where we were sitting, and she walked upstairs. And about 15 minutes later, I went upstairs to get a pack of cigarettes, and I had to pass the bathroom. And I noticed the door was locked. And I said, "Who's in the bathroom?" And nobody would answer. And I saw a light on, and I could hear water running, and I got very, very scared. You know, and I tried to push the door open, and I couldn't, and I called my brother, and we kicked the door in, and my mother was standing there like in a catatonic state, and she had a handful of these pills. They're barbiturates. They're like sleeping pills. You know, but if you take a lot of them, you know, you die. It's like committing. She was trying to commit suicide. That was what she was trying to do. And she was standing over the toilet bowl, and you know, her mind was somewhere else. She didn't see me standing there. She didn't see my brother, and she had most of the pills in her mouth already. And I had to grab her and you know, pull the pills out of her mouth and like shake her up. And my father just walked out, and he saw the whole thing, and he didn't know what to do first. I think he wanted to kill me, but at the same time he wanted to console my mother, and he didn't know what to do first.
I left my little boy. He's 4 years old. I left him home with my husband, you know. And when I came back, my husband was knocked out on the floor from ODing, and my little boy was running around the house crazy, screaming. The Spike was laying there, you know, and he was all upset. And, oh, man, he was crying, and I'll never forget that, never. He says, "Mommy, Daddy stuck the needle in his arm, and I think Daddy's dead, Mommy. What are we going to do, Mommy?" You know.
I reached a point where just everything I did and everywhere I went, it just seemed to drag, and even dope seemed to drag, and it seemed like I couldn't get high enough to get this feeling out of me of depression.
You lose all self-respect too. I got to the point where I was beating them cancer boxes off the counters, you know, for a few dollars that was in it, and snatching old ladies' purses on the subways. You know, it is kind of a drag. You know, when you're hooked, that's all you have to live for is where your next shot's coming from.
What got to be a drag with me was I finally got to the point where if I didn't get a shot, I was sick, and when I got a shot, then I felt I was normal. I didn't actually feel high or anything, and man, I was hustling all them hours, day after day, just to stay normal, and couldn't even get high anymore.
In New York, I used to live on 38th Street, and I used to cop on 135th Street, which is almost 100 blocks. And I used to get up in the morning, from morning till night, I'd make at least 6 or 8 trips back and forth and back and forth. And half the time I wouldn't have subway fare, and I'd have to scrounge even that up, and I'd be trying to save money for a pack of cigarettes or maybe a package of cupcakes, because I never used to eat. Once a week I'd have a can of spaghetti, and that was my meal. I even got to the point where I was so uptight one time that my father had a heart condition, and I went up to his house and took his heart pills. Well, that's the point I got to. It's really a rat race. It's ridiculous.
I didn't want to eat. I didn't even want to move too much. I just wanted to sit there and smoke and you know, stay in that world I was in. I wasn't even interested in girls.
You know, you don't have no social life. You know, girls don't want to even be seen talking to you on the street. You know, you don't want to go to any dances. You don't want to do anything that's fun. You don't want to go to the beach. You just grow into yourself and stay in your house. You nod off for 8 hours, and you wake up and you go out and find something else, either some wine or some marijuana or some more dope, and you go back upstairs and sleep.
I just wanted to stay in a chair and stay there for the rest of my life.
You know how you talk about girls, I used to think that if I was using these drugs, I would get all the best-looking girls and everything. And now that I look back, The only girls that bothered me with me when I was using drugs were girls that they were sluts. They were the worst girls that were at the dance.
You know,
My worst experience was once when I guess I was alone and I didn't have no money. And I guess the only way I knew how to get money was by turning tricks. So I sort of, I found this old man and I turned a trick with him, for a couple of dollars. And then, like, just to buy the stuff to feel normal, it was sort of a miserable feeling, and then I really didn't have no place to go, and I had to go and stay in the basement, and I was very miserable.
I feel that I missed out on a lot of things. I mean, I feel like for school, I had big plans to go to college and everything, and I feel like very bad about my daughter. I feel like I really messed up there.
All the other people were supposed, to me, I looked upon them as squares. But now as I look back on it, I know that I'm the square and that the people that was not using marijuana or heroin were the guys I feel that were the hip guys.
Yeah, well, at that time I thought that breaking every law possible was the most glamorous thing, and now I know that drug addiction is about as glamorous as cancer.
And I felt very, very whipped, very lonely. There was nobody around I knew, and I wanted to do myself in, man. I just didn't want to live anymore, man. So I copped about half a load and some pills, and I went over to his friend's house. I borrowed his works. I went up on his rooftop, and I just did it all up, man. I just kept shooting up and dropping pills, man. And I thought I was going to die. I really thought, I was hoping I was going to die, and I felt very drugged, man. I woke up 3 days later, man. I was drugged. I said, what happened, man? How come I'm still here? And I really wanted to die, and I kind of realized then that maybe I was doing something wrong. Like, maybe this wasn't the way to live, but I didn't know any way out. It was the only way I knew.
Stay away from it, man. It ain't worth it. Because, all the things you got to go through. Going to jails and winding up, messing up your whole life.
It's a real drag.